Welcome, everyone. This is Sarah Ostman from the American Library Association's Public Programs Office. Thank you so much for joining us today for Go Out and Play, Community Engagement Through Turning Outward. We've had such a terrific response to this webinar, and we're really excited to bring our presenters together for this first-of-its-kind webinar. A few technical notes before we get started. You saw when we first started the presentation that we have some related files available for you today. You'll be able to download those again at the end of today's presentation. They include the PowerPoint slides from today's webinar, as well as our Libraries Transforming Communities Getting Started workbook. So keep an eye out for them at the end of the hour. If you have questions while our presenters are speaking, feel free to type it in the chat box. If we don't answer it during the presentation, we'll come back to it during the Q&A at the end. If you have any technical issues over the coming hour, send a private message to Brian Russell. To do that, just hover over Brian's name. You'll see it at the top of the attendees list to the right of your screen. Once your cursor is over Brian's name, click on Start Private Chat. And finally, this session is being recorded, and the recording will be available for free viewing at the Libraries Transforming Communities website and on programminglibrarian.org. I want to start us off with a little background about Libraries Transforming Communities, which is the project that have brought all of our presenters together. Libraries Transforming Communities is an ALA initiative created in partnership with the Harwood Institute for Public Innovation and funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It seeks to strengthen libraries' roles as core community leaders and change agents. Why do we want that? In short, we think that when libraries are better connected to their communities, everyone wins. Libraries are natural leaders. We are trusted, we're connected, we're nonpartisan, and we are rooted in our communities. Libraries are in a unique position to help our communities thrive, and ALA and the Harwood Institute believe these tools that we'll be discussing over the course of the next hour can help libraries fill that role. Libraries Transforming Communities is based on the Harwood Institute's practice of turning outward, making the community, not the library, the focus of our efforts. So that may sound a little bit ambiguous, but it comes down to practical steps. Taking steps to better understand your community, changing the way you think and the way you work to make your library more community focused, being proactive to community issues, and putting our community's aspirations above all else. So what does all that mean? I'm going to give you some broad strokes now just as an introduction, and our presenters will have a lot more to say on the topic. First, it means talking to your community. It means finding out what they really want instead of guessing or assuming that we know what's best for them. It means thinking about and sharing what you learned from your community and working with partners to take smart action that will help to get things done. And again, this is a step-by-step process, so there are free resources to help you along the way, and we will be touching on those today. When we were just starting Libraries Transforming Communities in early 2014, ALA and the Harwood Institute announced the Libraries Transforming Communities Public Innovators Cohort, a group of 10 public libraries that would undergo extensive training in these community engagement techniques. This was a total experiment. We wanted to know if these techniques would work in a public library setting and what these 10 very different public libraries would accomplish given some training and guidance. This turned out to be a hugely popular idea. We had almost 100 public libraries apply for the opportunity, and of course we only had 10 spots. So this map shows the 10 libraries that were selected for the Public Innovators Cohort. As you can see, they represent a wide range of geographies, big cities and small towns, and they faced all manner of challenges, ranging from fast-changing demographics to public safety concerns to challenges surrounding literacy. One thing that several of these libraries talked about was a lack of connection within the community. This is a photo of our 10 cohort library teams when they gathered for the first time in 2014. Since this photo was taken, they have been learning the Turning Outward tools through a series of trainings, webinars, and phone calls. But most importantly, they've been learning through a process of trial and error. They've been putting these tools to use in their communities, seeing what worked and what didn't work, all in the hopes of helping their communities tackle problems and see real change. One thing I want to stress is that the work that these 10 libraries did can be replicated by anyone at any library. All the Turning Outward tools are available for free on the LTC website, and you can also view the webinar recordings that the cohort libraries created over the course of the last year and a half. So here is our agenda for the rest of the hour. We are going to hear from 3 of the LTC cohort libraries today: Red Hook Public Library in Red Hook, New York, Columbus Public Library in Columbus, Wisconsin, and Spokane County Library District from Eastern Washington. We're going to go through each presentation, and at the end we will have a Q&A. Again, as they talk, the presenters will be referring to specific tools, such as the Ask exercise or the Community Conversation Workbook. You can download those tools from the website, ala.org/LTC. And we will also have the full workbook of all of these materials available for download at the end of the hour. Also note that all of these tools can be adapted. You can shorten them, you can change them however you see fit for your own needs. First up is Erica Freudenberger. Erica is a self-described promiscuous collaborator who believes libraries can help communities transform. When not chasing people down to do stuff with her, Erica leads the Red Hook Public Library, designated a 5-star library by Library Journal and a finalist for the best small library in America. And of course, she was delighted to be part of the LTC Public Innovators Cohort. We're also thrilled to have Brent Kovalchik with us today. Brent is the Deputy Mayor of Red Hook and has been active throughout the LTC project. Take it away, Erica.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and thanks everybody for coming out. We're really excited to share our story. So to start, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our library, which this is a picture of, our journey, and where we are today. We're a small rural library, which you may be able to tell from the picture. We are housed in a mid-19th century octagonal building in the Hudson Valley of New York. We're chartered to serve 1,961 people, which is the village of Red Hook, but in fact we serve the entire town of Red Hook and part of the neighboring town of Milan. So we have altogether about 4,500 cardholders. When I applied to be part of the library's Transforming Communities cohort, I was the first and only full-time employee at the library. I don't know if this strikes true for anybody else out there, but when you're a small rural library, that's entirely a possibility. One of the requirements for the grant was that we had to put together a team of 3 to 5 people, and if I had done that, we would have had to close the library. So that was really great, so I turned it out to the community to recruit. Our team includes Brent, who you saw a picture of before, our Deputy Mayor, and the Associate Director of Bard College Center of Civic Engagement, a former Director of Parks in our region, as well as the library's Head of Circulation, and of course myself. When I started at the library 5 years ago, I had a budget of $165,000 a year and an inherited renovation building project, which was being financed out of that budget. The library had a reputation for being a place so unfriendly and inhospitable, it was best to avoid altogether, especially if you had kids under the age of 18. So to recap, I didn't really know what I was doing, I didn't have enough staff, I didn't have enough money, and most people avoided the library like the plague. What I didn't realize at the time was that this set of limitations was a tremendous gift. I didn't know what I was doing, so I had to get creative. And I began by trying to raise the profile of the library. In the beginning, I tried to spread or push out our message to the public. I did tons of outreach, telling everyone all about our fabulous services, sending out hundreds of press releases, and began aggressively marketing the library and using social media. But I couldn't change how people felt about the library by singing our praises. I was an unreliable narrator. Their experience had been otherwise, so why would they believe me? Since pushing information out into the community wasn't doing the trick, I did the next logical thing. I tried to pull information from the community. We held focus groups and sent surveys, trying to figure out what people wanted. But I still wasn't getting the information that I needed. All that I heard was that people wanted more of everything, which we were not in the position to offer. I had learned from watching our friends group host this successful big read that the library was an integral part of a larger socio-ecosystem, the village and town it served. They taught me this: libraries don't exist in vacuums. The only way we would survive and eventually thrive was to demonstrate our value by being part of something much larger than the library. If our village and town didn't flourish, neither would we. We learned from the LTC grant that we as librarians have what is called expert knowledge. That means that we know how to navigate, compile, and assess information, which is really important because information plays an essential role in community life. But we don't always have the information we need. What we need is what they call public knowledge, and that simply is how people feel about the community where they live and what they aspire to. We may think we know, but until we ask, we're really just guessing. What we needed to do was engage people in conversation, ask them questions, and listen carefully to their answers. Until we knew what really mattered to our community, we wouldn't be able to do the work we needed to do. In order to get people to come back to the library, I needed to do as my mother had always admonished, to go outside and play. We needed to transform not only what we do as librarians, but how we position ourselves in the communities we serve. We needed to stop worrying about communicating our value and be valuable instead. It's time to move away from marketing and outreach and embrace engagement. And if you do that, the results are really profound. By stepping back from being the loudest voice in any room advocating for the library, you allow others to step forward. I've had some amazing experiences of other people advocating for and promoting the library, some of which have taken place in my presence, but most of which do not. I've learned to let others tell our story. It's far more powerful than anything that we can come up with. And guess what? When others tell the story, their neighbors and friends believe it. Engagement moves away from marketing and outreach to empowerment, which is essential to any democracy. Too often, people feel powerless over what they can do to affect political change or address problems in their community. They see their role as consumers or customers, and we treat them as such, rather than active, informed citizens who play a critical role in democracy. We need to help our communities understand where community and individual needs intersect, and we need to demonstrate that we can help the communities we serve become what they aspire to be. Which means we need to change how we do things. Unfortunately, we have the tools to do just that. We started with the Ask exercise. It's a great tool to begin with because it's done one-on-one, and I like to think of it as the gateway drug to the Harwood tools. Brent, our deputy mayor, would go door-to-door each campaign season to talk to people. He suggested that we do that using this Ask exercise, which we did. And I'm going to turn it over to him to let him tell you what happened next.
Thanks, Erica. As a non-librarian and a public official, I am used to hearing a lot of critical comments and problems. The Ask exercise questions were apolitical, non-confrontational, and easy to understand. When we decided to go door-to-door in the village, I was joined by an intern from Bard College. Bard College is located within the town of Red Hook and close by, and the students are very accessible and eager to help. As we went from house to house, we talked to everyone, from young kids to senior citizens. At each house, we asked the same 4 questions. What kind of community do you want to live in? Why is that important to you? How is that different from how you see things now? And what are some of the things that need to happen to create the kind of change between what kind of community you want to live in and what you actually see happening now? The slide that's in there shows you the exercise that we followed. We asked us 4 questions, but we also were joined by, there's 2 of us that usually attend to these things, and one took notes, and the other one listened intently. And that way, we got a good record of what people were saying. We talked to more than 200 people using the Ask exercise and other Harvard tools. We used the Ask exercise at community events, celebrations, public gatherings, and during chance encounters with people on the street and in local businesses. We quickly heard the same thing at each house. Most people could not attend local board meetings or public hearings, and they felt very uneasy speaking in a formalized public setting. By going door to door, people were relaxed, comfortable, and eager to talk. While the Ask exercise typically takes 5 minutes, when done in someone's home, it took closer to a half an hour or 45 minutes. And people actually felt they were being listened to and having a say in what happened in their community. They felt as if they had more ownership in shaping their community's outcome. And in fact, they did. When we went door to door, we found that one common concern was traffic safety. The issue stemmed from a traffic light, the only traffic light in the village of Red Hook. The timing on the traffic light has been a problem since it was installed 20 years ago. Cars were left sitting at the light for up to 7 minutes, causing massive traffic problems and frustrating drivers. To avoid the light, many drivers began to travel on residential streets, putting pedestrians in danger, especially since the residential area of our village does not have sidewalks. This has been a problem for 20 years, but it was only when we had heard hard data from the Ask exercise that village officials and the State Department of Transportation started paying attention, and it was amazing how quickly the problem was fixed. In June of 2015, we shared our findings about how many people were frustrated by the light. 4 months later, the problem was fixed, because not only did the mayor call to resolve the issue, but when the DOT, or the Department of Transportation, neglected to take notice, he posted his contact information to social media so that concerned villagers could contact the DOT directly.
Brent, can I break in for a second? Brent, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're having some trouble with the mic. If you could pull it away from your mouth a little bit, I think that we would be able to hear you better.
Okay.
So keep speaking loudly, but just pull the mic away from your mouth.
Okay, is this better, Sarah?
That's better for me. People comment in the chat box if you have any more trouble.
It was eye-opening to see how a couple of people going door to door and asking a few questions could solve a problem that had been plaguing us for decades. Engagement is a new way of looking at and orienting.
I think we've lost you altogether now, Brent. Can you put the mic a little closer again?
Okay, is this better?
Yes, right there is great.
Okay.
Hey, Brent, so I just wanted to sum up for people because I think that a lot of people couldn't hear what Brent was saying. One of the main things that Brent had heard when he went door to door was that there was a lot of issue about, we have one traffic light in our community. And about 20 years ago when it was installed and it was faulty. And it had been a problem since then. We had really extended delays. So traffic just would get way backed up and couldn't pass through the intersection, and it was a big issue. And yet it was just not getting resolved. And because of some issue between a past mayor and the head of the Department of Transportation, memories in rural communities last a long time. So it was not going to be fixed. And until we went door to door and we alerted the village board, who started calling again, and they weren't having a lot of luck, so we decided to go to social media and post on it that if people were interested in making a change, we posted the number and the name of the guy at the DOT to call. And as the calls started coming in, sure enough, a change happened. And it was this really kind of amazing, empowering thing to see that by identifying the problem, by asking our community to act on it, we were able to make a change that hadn't happened in the previous 2 decades. And that was a result of engagement. And that's the amazing thing about engagement. It's a new way of looking at and orienting oneself to the world. When we learned about the Harwood tools, our team initially felt very smug because we had developed some fantastic collaborations and partnerships in the community before we became involved in the cohort. And we figured we were way ahead of the rest of the teams. Turns out we were wrong. Collaboration and partnership are not community engagement. Those are the starting points on a much longer journey. Having meetings and building partnerships is important, but until we make time to have conversations with our communities about their aspirations, we're only scratching the surface. In the past 18 months, we've talked to hundreds of people. And when we go out and ask them questions, we do not ask questions about the library because it's not about us. And I know this is really hard to let go of, but it's not. It's about our communities. What we've heard in these conversations is completely different from what we heard in focus groups and surveys I did when I first came to Red Hook. Then when we asked what people wanted to see from the library, they didn't really know what to say, except they wanted more of everything, which wasn't really, as I said before, a possibility for us. When we asked them what their aspirations are for the community, we heard things like traffic safety and walkability. We need more volunteer and leadership opportunities for teens. We want to have a thriving business community. And as this LTC ad shows, a lack of reliable public transportation means that not everyone can get to where services and fun stuff is happening. And we needed to do something about that. These are the things that we can and are addressing and helping to bring about the changes that are important to the quality of life in our community. How does this help us? In the past 4 years, our budget has increased by 97%, and there are now 3 full-time as well as 10 part-time staff at the library. So it also signals an important shift in our thinking about our role as a public library. As the incredibly fabulous Emily Bunyan from another LTC library, Knox County Public Library in Indiana, so beautifully puts it, community engagement is about shifting the focus from the library being the heart of the community to the community being the heart of the library.
Thanks so much, Erica and Brent. That was great. Erica and Brent told us how their library used the 4-question ask exercise, that exercise that begins, what kind of community do you want to live in? Why is that important to you? And how that tool helped them learn what was important to Red Hook residents. Now, Cindy Fessmeyer, director of the Columbus Public Library in Columbus, Wisconsin, is going to tell us how she used and adapted the more in-depth community conversations tool, and how the knowledge that she gathered sparked a grassroots program at her library called Root for Columbus. Cindy?
Thanks so much, Sarah. So before I get started, I want to say a big hello to Wisconsin libraries. I see there's a lot on the call right now. Yay, we're representing. So like Erica told you a little bit about her library, I'm going to tell you a little bit about mine. So we are rural, though not the same brand of rural as Red Hook, I think. We are increasingly becoming a bedroom community for a larger metro area toward the center of the state, and that is Madison, Wisconsin, which is the seat of government as the state's capital. And it's also got one of the biggest universities in the country, that's UW-Madison, University of Wisconsin-Madison. And Columbus is about maybe 35-minute drive from the very downtown where the Capitol and the university are located. So we're finding ourselves kind of stuck between 2 populations, as you can see on this slide. On the one hand, a lot of residents of Columbus have lived here for multiple generations. They have been deeply involved in some kind of agricultural or manufacturing economic base for the community, and they raise their kids here. Their kids stay. Grandkids come back. These are the folks that everybody knows the name in town. They're also folks who tend to have a little bit more money in town and can sort of sway public opinion. On the other hand, like I said, we're having folks move into the area because for the same amount of money they can get a significantly larger home with a larger yard and a really nice school system and drive the about half-hour commute into Madison. In our county, 35% of the people are driving into Madison for work each day, and we're only about 5 miles from the border with that county. So we've got a lot of people moving in. Consequently, as you can probably guess, these 2 populations, which we call traditional and innovative, do not necessarily get along. On the face of it, they look very different, they sound different, and they have different roles in the community. So politically and economically and culturally, religiously, a lot of those kind of hot button issues are tearing our community apart. And it was time for the library to kind of stake its claim at the heart of the community and do something about that. So what I just told you about, the problems that we face here in Columbus, that information was garnered using this tool, the community conversation. I know the slide's really hard to read, but click on that link when you go back through and you can download this tool for yourself. But it's not completely unlike the ask exercise that Erica and Brent talked about. It, like many Harwood tools, begins with what kind of community do you want, and it walks you through how could you get to that, who would need to participate for that, what does success look like, what can we do about it. You can see some of this stuff here. For Columbus, this was by far our favorite tool, and it's the one that yielded really good results. We did, I believe, 10 conversations around town over the course of multiple months, and that was with groups as small as maybe 6 people and as large as 30, but it was still doable as a conversation. This tool requires 2 people. It requires one person to pretty highly facilitate this. So if in 90 minutes to 2 hours you're going to talk through all of this stuff, you need someone to, 1, keep people on track, and 2, really keep things going. So if you're not a facilitator, learn. It's not that hard to do. And then the second role is for someone to take notes, because it's those notes that are going to yield the messages like I just shared with you about our kind of clashing populations. So here in Columbus, like I said, we did about 10 of these conversations, and I just put this picture up because it's my favorite one. This is a vacant storefront in our downtown area. We have an old, very cute downtown area with lots of antique stores, which are never open, and a lot of empty storefronts, which have been closed for years. And the growth that's happening in our community is happening at the edges of town, close to the freeway ramps, not right downtown. So I'm sure a very familiar story for a lot of you on this call today. The reason we had one of these community conversations in a vacant storefront, which you can see the for rent sign in the front there, is because this was a conversation of our local Chamber of Commerce and our local downtown Columbus business group. And so what better way than to light up an empty storefront with business owners who had a vested interest in creating a more vibrant downtown than to populate a vacant space. So I just wanted to share that picture. To me, it symbolizes a whole lot. I hope that makes some sense. So you're going to hear about some more tools along the way, but I just want to mention that you can customize stuff to your own community as well. So for us, on our Harwood team, like Erica, we had 5 people, and one of the women, Mary Lou Sharpie, is on the Library Board of Trustees, and she's also the president of the Literacy Council, and she is a retired teacher, and she believes wholeheartedly that you need to do something visual and participatory in order to get people engaged in the Columbus area. So what we did is kind of a spin on a typical wish tree. And in the right-hand corner, you'll see we really just took kind of a dead tree branch, put it in a Christmas tree stand, and it traveled around town for about 2 months to, in this case, schools, banks, coffee shops, the library, the hospital, all over town. And in each place, we collected a bunch of those tags, which ended up becoming quantifiable data for us, which is really nice. A lot of the tools you're going to hear about today are not so much quantity as quality, and a little more narrative and mushy data. So this one question, and the question was, what kind of a community do you want? This one question method gave us some data in that way. And just while we were at it, we decided to name the tree, and we called it the Root for Columbus tree. So people would come into the library and ask us, so what's up with this Root for Columbus tree I just saw at the drugstore or at the bank or down the street, and what's going on with that? We heard that question, what's up with this Root for Columbus thing, so many times that we took it a step further, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment. So between the ask exercise, some other Harwood exercises, the community conversations, and our Root for Columbus tree, we ended up with a whole lot of information about our community. So it's one thing to gather that, but then you need to do something useful with it. So we went through, and our team of 5 people themed out all of the information that we heard. So again, this is a tool that's available at the ALA LTC site. But it talks you through how to identify themes in all of this information that you've collected. And then it tells you how to take those themes and fit them together into kind of a story. So out of this mostly mushy narrative data, you end up with kind of a Mad Lib kind of thing you see at the bottom of the page there, where it says try out your story, and this becomes your community narrative. So for us, we took the many pieces of information, and gosh, it was a wide range of info that we heard from folks, and I'll tell you about that in a minute too. But we had to narrow it down to fill in those 5 blanks, and figure out how to tell the story of the information we had collected over a number of months. This is the narrative for Columbus. It is, people want a vibrant and welcoming community for all, but they're concerned that people don't work well together. As people talk more about these concerns, they talk about the lack of boundary-crossing social interaction and the lack of stuff to do for kids and families. They say we need to focus on bringing people together to create civic pride. And if citizens themselves played a part in these actions, folks would be more likely to trust the effort and step forward. So you'll see how this narrative takes some of those specific questions from the Ask exercise and the community conversation and our tree, and it plugs that information in to create this story of what we've been learning about the community that we serve. I'm going to guess that this isn't terrifically different from organization to organization. It's a little bit overarching. I got to say the word vibrant comes up a lot when people create their narrative, and clearly that's something that people want for their community across the country, not just here in the Midwest or here in Wisconsin. But for us in particular, this is meaningful because it tells us that people want to, 1, do stuff together, and 2, they need stuff for families to do. It also tells us that they didn't necessarily trust any one individual or one group to pull people together and start getting over those old hurts. Instead, our bottom bullet point is that citizens themselves would need to play a part in kind of mending those hurts and moving forward together. So for us, the big trusted partners would be citizens, because during our community conversations toward the end, when you ask, and who in this community could help us move forward toward this thing we've just been talking about for like an hour, 9 times out of 10, it was silence, and no one had anyone to recommend whatsoever. So we put citizens themselves in there with a helping hand from the library. So once you gather your data, theme it out, create your narrative, you still don't have anything. You have a message in a bottle, but then you got to go and throw that bottle into the ocean somewhere. So you need to report back what you found in talking to your community. I got to say it's really important, especially to speak with the people that you most deeply engaged with. So anyone who attended a community conversation, or in the case of Red Hook, if you spent a good hour with somebody at their home talking about their community, those are the people that you have to make sure you report back to. So in our case, we held a couple of community gatherings to sort of share a PowerPoint, and this is a slide from that PowerPoint, and I'll explain it in a moment. But then we also went back to the group. So we went to a Chamber of Commerce meeting to talk about it. We went to a Rotary meeting to talk about it. We went to the school to talk about it. And we wanted to make sure that everyone understood that the kind of sharing process that we had was going to move towards something. It wasn't just the opportunity to speak. Some action was going to come of it. So for us, what we reported back was we'd read that narrative, but then we would also say people want that community. They want stuff, in our case, specifically for teenagers to do. We don't have a teen center, and if you're not into sports, there's not a whole lot for you here in Columbus. We wanted people to have social gatherings that spanned boundaries, and we wanted stuff for family and kids to do. We also heard along the way that there just wasn't any way to find out about the stuff going on around town, even though the disparate groups who address all of these issues have their own newsletters and websites and all of that. There was no one-stop shopping. So an immediate result for us was right in the middle of this slide. We created a thing called the Columbus Community Calendar, and that's where the library, the hospital, the local schools, community recreation, and the community senior center got together and paid like less than $100 to create an online calendar that we will populate for any local happening going on. Just send us our information and we'll put it up on the web. So now we have one-stop shopping for that. more than that. As I said, when we reported back to people, we wanted to let them know that something was going to happen from these conversations that they had been having and the opinions they had been sharing. So we created a thing called the Root for Columbus Action Potluck. The name Root for Columbus stuck. So Libraries Transforming Communities was out, and the thing that made sense for our town was Root for Columbus. And these action potlucks are people coming together in a very facilitated way to have large and small group discussions, and each small group walks out after the 2 hours with an action plan about a very small project that they're going to do in the community over the coming months before the next community potluck. And we do 3 of these per year, it's starting to look like. So this is our first one. It was when it was still summer, and we had more than 40 people show up, which for a Columbus adult program is phenomenal. So we were very pleased with this, but I do have to point out that you'll see in the upper left-hand corner, it was a potluck to start. Every time we bring Root for Columbus together, it's always a potluck because that's just part of our culture. Feeding people, or people feeding each other is really quite powerful, and so we take advantage of that. Out of that first Root for Columbus potluck, this is just some screen captures of a couple of the projects that happened. On the right, it's a sample from a web page called Columbus Gnomes Away from Home, and it was a social media scavenger hunt where these 2 gnome fellas traveled around town over the course of the summer. Every couple weeks, a new set of poems went up, and families, dog walkers, whomever were encouraged to follow the poem and snap a photo with them and the gnome. And the kind of clever thing this group added was the little signs that say Columbus, Wisconsin. So as snaps went up on Facebook, our town was promoted along the way. On the left, that is a grandmother and her granddaughter who together decorated a very plain park bench and made it into what we called an art bench. So we did 7 of these, and local artists worked on turning benches into works of art and peppered them around town. Right now they're starting to come in for the winter, but it really was a unique, vibrant way to see the result of Root for Columbus. The biggest effect that we had was on our strategic plan, and in fact, tonight, for the first time, I and our city administrator are going to go in front of our city council and propose that the library expand. Our library is very small. We serve a municipal population of 5,000, but a full we serve about 15,000 people when you include the more rural areas around us. So with our 6,000 square feet, we've been out of space for decades. So in a quest to make our space bigger, rather than just blowing out a wall, which is the usual, through all of our work with LTC and the Harwood process, we've learned that we would have much more impact within the community and for more people involved in the community if we're one of just a number of people who are involved in the creation of a new community center. So we're going to be pitching that to our council tonight. Wish us luck. Hopefully with all of our wish power, we'll actually get someplace. But I have to say that without talking to our community and hearing what they wanted, we would never have come to this community center concept, and I'm really thrilled that we did. Thanks.
Thanks, Cindy, and yeah, good luck tonight. Keep us posted. So we've now heard from 2 small single-branch libraries who are using the Turning Outward tools. Next, we are going to hear from Amber Williams, who will share this community engagement approach has been adopted and spread through the 10 branches at her systems, in her system. Amber has been with the Spokane County Library District for more than 9 years. As the current Deer Park community librarian, her focus is to integrate the library into the city of Deer Park. When she's not attending meetings, events, judging poetry slams, or running Lego contests, Amber is working with youth in implementing fun. Amber?
Thank you, Sarah. So, a quick snapshot of Spokane County Library District. We are, all said and done, a medium-sized library. But as a county library, we have 10 library locations in 10 different cities and towns. And the largest city in Spokane County is Spokane, and they have their own city library system. And then to just confuse it more, they're the Spokane Public Library, and we are the Spokane County Library, and not that anybody has any brand issue there, but yeah, a lot of people know the difference. We cover 1,700 square miles, 255,000 residents. We have 164 employees, and I want to point out that 15 of them are librarians, 3 managing librarians and 12 community librarians. And the breakdown on that community librarians is essentially the 2 larger libraries have 2, and all of the other, 2, and then 8 at the other 8 smaller locations. And I bring it up because it's the librarians who took on the bulk of implementing the Libraries Transforming Communities and Harwood practices. So, you have an interest in doing this at your library. I don't know if this is just my personality type, but I find when there aren't clear directions, I sure enjoy clear step-by-step examples. So I'm going to talk about how at a medium-sized library we did this district-wide and shifted our entire organizational outlook. First off, of course, is you got to get the right people on board. It's all about the buy-in. As both Cindy and Eric have mentioned, the whole process is going from outreach to engagement. And from experience, I can tell you this was a hard concept to wrap my mind around because I feel like we were doing that really well. But once you get it, it's this powerful thing. Instead of me telling you how awesome the library is, why don't you tell me what awesome looks like, and I can figure out how to be a relevant part of that. When you are talking to your board and your leadership, things to share, remind them that this is an ALA-supported initiative. It's been taken on by so many public libraries of different sizes, and looking at what you guys are sharing, there are so many larger systems than us. LA and San Jose were both part of the original 10 in the cohort. They've handled it a little bit differently than we did. They decided to take one location and go there. We were able to put all of our resources into it and then, at all 10 of our locations implement it. I think my experience has been really good, so I think getting everybody on board at the same time is kind of best practice. But if you've got to start somewhere small, then start somewhere small and at least make that change. And of course, the reminder that all of these resources are free. That never makes anybody angry. So if your leadership and your board aren't part of the decision, then I really recommend introducing these 2 Harwood tools to them. They're a great place to start and just sort of, give it a taste. The Aspirations Exercise is a 30-minute conversation that covers just these 3 questions. My aspirations are, my challenges, and the changes we need to see to get to our aspirations. It's a group discussion, and after discussion, you're able to, like so many other of the Harwood tools, put together this Mad Lib so that you can make a statement. And this is a great one for your board, and just a introduction to, these are the kind of questions I'm going to be asking the community. And you can see how important it is for the library to have these kind of answers, to know what your community wants. I also recommend the Turn quiz. The Turn Outward quiz is a great internal tool. It's a bigger PDF than this. This is just a screenshot of the actual quiz part of it. It's pretty straightforward. You go down the list and you check the left or the right for the word that best describes where your organization is. And it's just a good conversation starter. We did this with our leadership team, that being, our director, our deputy director, and basically everybody at that level and up. And it was fascinating to hear the differences of opinions on, one, what people felt the library should be doing, and just as a, well, versus what we should and what we shouldn't, and is this even the library's job? And having that conversation started to make people think, because it really comes down to, do you serve the library or do you serve the community? And that, it was kind of a light bulb for many of our leadership. You have to, identify who's going to be doing the bulk. So we have community librarians. That's what my job title is. And so it makes sense that since we are supposed to be integrated into the community, that we be the ones taking the show on the road and gathering the community knowledge. I am one of the 2 librarians that I list there, the deputy director and 2 librarians, who took the lead on learning all of the Harwood stuff and identifying what was going to be most useful, pass that along to all of the librarians who were then asked to, ahead of time, go through the webinars we had identified, go through the parts of the handbook that we identified, and then we gathered for a 3-hour training session. And in that 3 hours, we were able to do all things listed there. We, first off, sent staff to try the Ask exercise. This is the one that Brent went door to door. And we gave them the 3 questions and said, all right, head over to our admin building and ask people those 3 questions. You've got 15 minutes. It shouldn't take more than that. We led an aspirations exercise where we traded off facilitating and note-taking, and did the same thing with the community conversations, and went through the turn quiz. After we had finished this, we gave all of the librarians an opportunity at our all-staff day to lead community conversations with all of our staff. This was great twofold. It gave our librarians experience before they had to go and try this with the public, and 2, it acted as an introduction to all of our frontline staff to know that this is what we're doing, these are the questions we're asking the public, and they were able to answer questions if the public had them. I admit that this can be intimidating. I mean, we required this of all of our librarians, and admittedly not every one of our librarians was super excited to go and do this. So it's important to be realistic about goals. We asked that you organize and complete 1 community conversation in the first month. It was an attainable, realistic goal. And after that was done, as staff, we shared our successes and our failures. We learned from each other. Part of what's hard is, well, who do I go and talk to? For us, the first thing we did, here we've got staff day, everybody knows what we're doing. So we asked, hey, who do you know that would want to answer these questions? We went to book clubs, we went to sororities, service clubs, neighborhood associations, people who had really big families. Those were always fun. High school groups, people whose kids were in sports, went and spoke to a football team. Somebody's dad was chief of and a fire station, went and spoke to the fire department. And through that, the expectation was over 6 months total, you had 10 conversations in each area. That was our lofty goal. The reality is, though, we did 72 community conversations throughout our district. So 72 conversations. Part of that, not everybody has time for that 90 minutes to 120. 2 hours is a lot of time. So we, ran with the willing in that we had a fabulous conversation with preschool parents, and they only had a 60-minute meeting. So we literally got 55 minutes to go through those 10 questions, which means we trimmed off some of those. By that time, we've identified the things that are going to help us most. We want to know your aspirations, we want to know what the issues are, and we want to know what the most important issue is, and we want to know how we're going to move past that. Oh, it is a lot of work, but it's not always a lot of work. Like any kind of research, it's a lot of work up front, and then you've got the results and you get to do so much with them. So once upon a time, as a librarian, this is what I was doing, how I was spending my time. And to make the time to, one, be doing all these community conversations, we had to shift and give some things up. We read very differently. I'm not on the reference desk as much. Our reference desk is almost 100% manned by paraprofessionals. And while I am doing more programming, I'm doing community responsive programming. It's based off of what I heard my community wants. But by trimming down on some of those other things, I'm able to be at community meetings, I'm at community events, and all those other things that just sort of pop up, and sure, the library can do that. When you make the time for it, it's well worth it. All that time that I'm not at a reference desk is time that I am visible in my community. So 72 conversations later, with our 10 different communities, we have 10 very unique community narratives. Cindy shared Columbus's, and ours are not like hers because we heard different things. But the tool that we then use from Harwood is the Calibrating Community Conditions. Again, this is just a screenshot of the partial page, but essentially you're able to take your community conversation and identify, or your community narrative, and identify where your community is at in these 5 different stages of community growth. And the notebook has a far more in-depth list of do's and don'ts for actions, but in this screenshot you can see, if you identify that I'm working with a catalytic community, so I know that I need to try lots of small things to encourage informal networks, and that's going to be the thing that helps. Whereas if I was in the waiting place, people are not ready for that kind of progress. This was really helpful in deciding what to do next. We, also like Columbus, used our public knowledge to write our next strategic plan. In fact, it's called a community engagement plan, and all of our actions and goals are direct results. They were picked because of what we heard in community conversations. And so when we share out our community engagement plan to our communities, they're able to look at it and say, oh, hey, look at what they're doing about that thing that I brought up. Lastly, how do we know it's working? So we've been doing this for 18 months, but really out in the community for about a year. And in the last 12 months, we have staff members, and the key word here is invited to be board members on business chambers. We've got board members for other nonprofit organizations. We're sitting on action teams for other organizations, businesses, and nonprofits. We're participating in the planning of city events, facilitating multi-school district events. We're identified as a convener and somebody who crosses those territorial boundaries, and provide input into city planning. This is me in Deer Park, actually. Knowing that I've had all these community conversations, I was approached by the city planner who was working with the fire department to build the next fire station. And I've heard from so many people, we really need a community center. And I'm working with the fire department in their plans for the fire station to have a community center there. So yes, medium-sized library. This is how we implemented the tools.
Thanks, Amber, and thank you to all of our presenters. It's so interesting to hear how you all started with the same tools and implemented them in such vastly different ways. We have a few minutes for questions, so if you do have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat box. We have one already waiting for us from Julia, who says, Amber, can you talk about the kinds of programs you used to do versus the ones you are doing now?
Julia, we're doing so many more programs not in the library. I think that, again, I'm kind of on the youth side of things, so I'm going to speak personally here, but recognizing that not everybody can get to the library. I can't tell you how many conversations I'd be in and somebody would say, gosh, it would be so nice if the library would do something like story time. You're like, we have 52 a week. But yeah, okay, smile and nod, and say, well, what's keeping you from getting to there? And I mean, we do outreach story times, but I go to schools on a regular basis now to have like family STEM nights, and I'm making so much more effort to be where the people already are to give them the programming that they want. It does take more time, but like for me, again, family STEM nights and I just did one of those last week, which is why it's probably forefront in my mind. We do book clubs on the go. In the more traditional programming, it's a lot of, instead of doing it at the library, we heard people who wanted more business support, and we actually have business librarians now, and they are going to places to, meet with people where they're at to talk about, well, how do you start businesses, and putting them in touch with other kinds of resources. I don't want to take everybody's question time, so I hope that answered it.
We actually have another couple of questions here for you, Amber. The next one is, how did your staff schedules change to accommodate the community meetings? And Susan says, my staff is union with prescribed hours.
We are not union. I think that makes such an amazing difference in what kind of flexibility you can use. But what we did was we looked at job descriptions, and there was this expectation that we expect our members to be able to use our computers and place holds, so we should be able to expect any staff person to have that knowledge and be able to share that kind of information as well. It was kind of looking at job descriptions and making sure that instead of just doing what you were always doing, that you were working at sort of the top of your job description.
And we have another question here for Amber from Jacqueline, who says, after 72 conversations, has the traffic to the libraries and participation in library events increased?
I think traffic to libraries has increased. Participation in library events has increased in part because we're doing them where people are. And I mean, we didn't take on being part of this cohort because we had small numbers and we didn't have support in our communities. It was really about, we have no extra resources, but we found ways to use our resources with more intentionality. I think I know, speaking personally, that I don't live in Deer Park. In fact, I live 45 minutes away, but I'm so much more involved and recognized in that community than I am in my neighborhood. I can walk into any of my 3 school districts and they all know who I am because I've spent the time to be there. I'm approached to help facilitate things.
Cindy or Erica, do either of you want to speak to how participation in your library or turnout for library events has shifted, if it has?
Go for it, Erica.
Well, I would just, I was just going to echo what Amber said. We are doing the very same thing. What we heard, especially because we're in a rural area where we have incredibly crappy public transportation, and it really was an obstacle to people being able to use our services. And so we had a moment where it's like, why are we waiting for people to come to us? Why don't we go to where people are? And we started doing that. So now we do, especially with teens. We weren't getting teens into our library. Our building is only 4,600 square feet. That's divided up on 3 floors. We don't have a great teen area, and they weren't being captured. So we thought, why don't we just go to where they are? So we started doing programs during lunch hour at the high school in conjunction with the high school librarian. And that was so successful. Those tend to be maker programs, makerspace type of programs, that we decided then, like, okay, well, let's expand this and let's do this now after school. So now we do after school making programs for teens who aren't involved with sports or other after school activities. And it just kind of, and I just want to echo what Amber says. I will warn you, it does snowball. I mean, my biggest desire was for us to basically go viral and to be part of every conversation and at every table. It can feel overwhelming in the beginning as that begins to happen, because now we truly are everywhere. And like Amber said, you just start getting invited every place. And people expect you to be there and want you to lead things and want to, what we've heard, which has been really amazing, because as I said, when I started there about 5 years ago, people truly avoided us. You know, people would talk about, wouldn't it be great if there were a place in the community where anyone could go and they could, you know, have access to information and do all these things. And when I said we have that, we have a library, nobody believed me. Well, last April, we were at a meeting, and as we went around, all these different stakeholders in the community said, we want to be more like the library. That's a huge shift in our community, and something I'm really proud of, but it speaks to the work we've been doing with engagement, I think.
And I can say just a couple quick things in Columbus that have changed since then. As I said, people wanted more stuff for kids and families to do, especially school-age kids, actually especially middle schoolers. So we kind of made use of our very typically full single program room that we have here that's always busy in the morning and always busy in the evening. And in Columbus, we now have very regular after-school programs, Lego clubs and science clubs, and lots of stuff going on right after school, so kids can walk the 3 blocks to us, and that was all identified as a need through our conversations. But as a direct result, we've actually, not significantly, but somewhat reduced the number of children's programs that we offer so that we could expand into more tween and teen programming and really up our adult program numbers as well. And a big mover behind that is these Root for Columbus potlucks. Each one yields 3 to 4 small projects that will happen in the community over those months, and those small groups have to meet. And so every time they do, that's the Root for Columbus program, which is a program of the Columbus Public Library, and those numbers count as our program numbers. They meet wherever they need to meet, but it's still library programming. So that's been a nice quantifiable result for us.
We have a question here for Red Hook, and apologies for going a couple minutes over, but we'll get to the questions that are showing now. Mary says, has there been a shift of any sort in terms of the way the library works with village government as a result of this work?
Brent, you want to take that?
Well, we've noticed the library and the village are more partners now in the way we work together. An instance, a case in point would be, we recently shared a program with the library, but it also helped us garner volunteers for our tree planting that we do annually. We're part of Tree City USA, and the library did sponsor a program on how to plant a tree and prune a tree properly, and invited volunteers, and we actually saw an increase in volunteers on the actual tree planting day. We usually saw about 8 to 10 people. We had over 30 show up, only 16 trees to plant, but this was a direct result of working in partnership with the library. So it's been a real collaboration on what we do and what we can do together. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, Erica.
Well, first of all, we were so lucky to have Brent be a part of our cohort. So here we had somebody from the village government that was taking part in this training with us and doing this. But it also, so we were going through this and learning this and kind of on the same page. So it's not just the library that's turning outward, but the whole community is kind of reorienting ourselves. But when the mayor came to us and said that our farmers market was really struggling and we needed to do something, that's one of the places that we decided to go and start doing programming. So now each farmers market will do programming. And this year, one of the things that we did was, for the first time, was we did a Hispanic Heritage Month celebration. And we had our kickoff at the farmers market. And it was really great. We had, La Clinica, which was a mobile medical van, and dancers, and all sorts of different service providers there, in addition to the farmers. And we had more than 100 people come out. And the farmers were really happy. It was the best day that the farmers market had really had. We were happy because it was great to be able to use public space. And that's a big thing that actually Brent has been a tremendous advocate for, which is get outside of the library and use public space. That's what it's there for.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to wrap up, but first I have one quick announcement. If this work interested you, we have 2 conference programs coming up that you should be aware of. At ALA's Midwinter Meeting this January in Boston, there will be a session called a Deep Dive called Trust and Opportunities. And also at the Public Library Association Conference in April 2016 in Denver, our 3 presenters will be presenting a session as well. So we will send out some information about that to everyone who registered for this webinar, but please do stay on the lookout for programs like those as we continue to push out all this work. And I want to give another huge thanks to our presenters who are doing such awesome things and who gave of their time to do this presentation today. And thank you to everyone who turned out to listen.